So today we're going to do a slow cooker variation or something, a recipe, I don't know. I started with a random handful of stock cubes. That's going to provide a lot of flavor. These are those stock cubes that I showed you how to make on Boxing Day. And if you made a bunch of them, then you're ready for this. If you didn't, you could pour in a splash of some kind of canned broth of some sort. It's not going to be as good, but it'll do. Little salt and pepper because, I don't know, salt and pepper goes in almost everything. But the only time I don't use black pepper is when I'm using red pepper. Or sweet, of course. I don't put it in sweet stuff, just savory. And that, of course, is that pink Himalayan rock salt it's got a grinder on the top. So then in goes onions and garlic. There's like about 5 cloves of garlic and one smallish, not tiny but smallish onion, but a little bigger than a golf ball. There you can see how much garlic and onions. And all of the vegetables in this recipe were left in large pieces because I'm going to cook it slow and I've got large pieces of meat. And so for best vegetable results, you want big fat vegetables. You see, I broke the carrots in half is all I did. Peeled them, broke them in half. Potatoes, left them whole because they will not disintegrate as much. If you were to make them very small pieces, then by the time this recipe was done, they'd be mush. So then I laid in the turkey on top of all of that. This is my Lagostina enamelware. It's a Dutch oven, if you will. It's designed for slow cooking. And nice big chunks of turkey there from cutting up that 28-pound turkey. These are all turkey breast. The largest chunk I saved to make to cook like a saute like a steak, but all of the other chunks of breast went in here. And I really wonder what I'm doing in the distance. I'm doing something in the background. I think I'm getting I'm tearing the herbs into smaller bits. The herbs that I used were all fresh. I used carrot tops, just a little bit. I used kale, mainly because it's good for you. I used parsley because of really good flavor, and I used fenugreek because I had it, and I went, oh, well, okay, I've got lots of fenugreek. Now that's a big old dollop of poultry fat. You could use butter, you could use lard, but a little bit of fat makes everything a little bit tastier. You got to put a little fat in your dinners, your dishes. If it's too lean, then it doesn't have that satisfying final something. So here I am putting the broken up bits of greenery, the parsley, the carrot tops, the kale, the fenugreek. I had everything prepared, but these I decided needed to be torn into smaller chunks. So that's what I'm doing here, and I put those on top. And once I get all of the herbs in there, I've got everything done. Now this is a complete meal in a pot, and it's very quick. It takes longer to peel the garlic and onions than anything else. So in go all the greens, a nice big pile of them. You can see the fenugreek on top. It kind of looks like clover. Into the oven, the whole thing goes. And I have the oven set on a very low temperature, 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And 3.5 hours later, I came back to check it, and it was looking pretty good. It was steaming. It was the meat looked cooked. It had some broth happening, but the vegetables were still not tender. I went in there with this spoon and I just tried to break a carrot apart, and it resisted the spoon. It was resistant, so it wasn't done being tortured. Back into the oven you go. I stirred it up a bit just to have a look, and then went, no, it's got to go back in for a while. I think it went back in for about another hour. I think in total it probably took 4.5 hours for this to cook at 250, which it resulted in extremely tender turkey, so it was a really good way to go. 28-pound turkey has to be cooked with a little care because when they get that big, they get a little tougher because they're getting older. Here, you can see, they just breaks apart. That's what you want. That's after 4.5 hours at 250 degrees. And I gave it a bit of a stir to show you how, everything had just kind of cooked and blended, and it was all ready to go, and yummy. It was really quite good. But one thing that I noticed was that the broth was, it was almost like a stew. So I went over and I put I started, I was going to just pour it out, and I'm like, wait, no, I need the lid to hold the stuff in. So I put the lid offset by about 1/2 inch, and that gives me a gap at the bottom, and unfortunately the camera angle's bad, but I poured all that into my little saucepan so that the food stayed in the pot. And as you see, all that liquid broth, see, that's not a gravy, that's just runny wet. So I put it on the stove to boil, and while it's boiling, some bad footage, I got out the arrowroot starch. I was going to use tapioca flour, but I couldn't find it, but I did find the arrowroot starch. And cornstarch, arrowroot starch, there's a whole lot of thickening agents, tapioca starch, that you can use. So I put in a good generous, I'd say it's about 1/4 cup of the starch, and took it over to that's what it looks like, Bob's Red Mill. Took it over to the sink and added cold water. I did try doing this with the hot broth, and it started to cook in the bowl, and all I got was lumps. So instead, you want to make a paste. So you want to add water slowly. You don't want to flood it and wind up with too much water, because then you'll get lumps. By going with smaller amounts of water, it absorbs better, and it smooths out better. I was having a hard time with it, but I did eventually get it to flow into a paste. Added enough water, and just kept gently stirring it until I was able to make a runny paste out of it, because that's the state you want it to be in when you're going to put it in the pot, is a nice runny paste. So just keep gently stirring it. Add water in slow bits, because it'll go from dry lumps with a little bit of liquid to all of a sudden you've got a runny paste. So don't over anticipate the amount of water to add. And you take that over to the stove, and when the stuff's boiling really good, you start stirring a hole in the middle. And I should have used a whisk for this. I really should have used a whisk. I would have got a better result. As it is, I got some lumping, but nobody noticed, so that's okay. And you want to whisk and rapidly stir that stuff into the boiling, because it's going to start cooking as soon as it hits that boiling liquid. And that's what you see the lumps. That's why I should have used a whisk, so that you break up those lumps even as they form. Never mind, I still got a nice thick gravy out of it. And it was really funny, because when my husband had some, he looks at it and goes, "Is that gravy?" I had to think for a minute, because I'm not a gravy person. It's not like I opened a box of gravy. I had to think, what's gravy? Oh yeah, gravy is when you thicken the juices with a thickener. So yes, that's gravy. And he was all pleased, because he's a meat and potatoes and gravy kind of guy. So off came the lid. I had to use the oven mitt. It's hot. And I poured this, and I could have actually added water and had more, but it worked out. I poured it on, and I stirred it in, and we enjoyed a very fine meal that required almost very, very little effort on my part, which is good, because I was busy canning turkey and editing videos, and I really didn't have a lot of time to prepare supper. But now we had supper for the next 2 or 3 days that was wholesome, nourishing, a complete meal in a pot. And hubby liked it.